Hello everyone. We are in the middle of a series titled Doctrine of the Bible. The last two videos were discussing the reliability of the Bible. And this video is also going to be talking about the reliability of the Bible with special focus on archaeological discoveries. Now you might ask, why do we need so many videos on the reliability of the Bible? And the response to that is that this is one of the most important foundations on which everything else stands as far as Christian faith and practice is concerned. In other words, if the Bible is not a reliable book, then Christian faith crumbles down very, very quickly. In this video, I want to divide our discussion into two main sections. In the first section, we're going to talk about what is archaeology and why it is important. And in section 2, I'm going to talk about 4 archaeological discoveries that have contributed to enhancing our trust in the reliability of the Bible. So let's begin with section 1, in which we talk about what is archaeology and why is it important. The word archaeology comes from 2 Greek words. The first one is archaeos, which means old or ancient, and the second word, logos, means study or discipline or science. So archaeology actually means the study of ancient things or the study of antiquity. The Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines archaeology as the scientific study of material remains of past human life and activities. The scientific study of material remains of past human life and activities. Josh McDowell tells us that the task of the archaeologist is to take what remains from a society and reconstruct what that artifacts tell us. So that's what the archaeologist is supposed to do. Now, why is the study of archaeology important and relevant? It is important and relevant to the student of the Bible because archaeology has played a great role in proving the reliability of the Bible. Now, in the modern era, there have been different waves of skepticism that have come against the Bible, questioning its rationality, questioning its historicity, questioning its reliability, its trustworthiness, and so on. For example, in the age of reason, the time that we call enlightenment, people were questioning the rationality of things in the Bible. When science began to grow, certain people began to assume that science disallows the possibility of miracles and therefore began to question everything in the Bible that was miraculous. So there have been waves of skepticism that have come against the Bible. Now, there were also biblical critics who began to say that certain things in the Bible is not true because they did not find any extra biblical mention of it or extra biblical proof for it. For example, the first group of people that I'm going to discuss in section 2 is the group of the Hittites, the people called the Hittites. They are mentioned 50 times in the Bible. But since the biblical skeptics did not find mention of the Hittites outside of the Bible, they began to say that this is an imagination or this is an imaginary group of people that have been constructed by the people of Israel during the writing of the Bible. Or for example, the house of David, according to some people, did not exist at all. Or for that matter, Luke as a historian is not a reliable historian, and so on. So skepticisms of different types began to rise up against the Bible, and the conservative scholars of the Bible had no way of combating many of such challenges until archaeological discoveries began to be made. Now, I'm going to bring to our attention 2 quotations. One is from Walter F. Albright, and this is what he writes in his book, The Biblical Period from Abraham to Ezra. He writes, "Until recently, It was the fashion among biblical historians to treat the patriarchal sagas of Genesis as though they were artificial creations of Israelite scribes of the divided monarchy, or told by the imaginative rhapsodists around Israelite campfires during the centuries following the occupation of the country. Eminent names among scholars can be cited for regarding every item of Genesis 11 to 50 as reflecting late invention. So when we go through this video, you would very soon find that biblical skeptics were very heavily prejudiced against the Bible, and they began to argue that everything in Genesis 11 to 50 was born in the imagination of the Israelites many years after their founding as a kingdom. But Albright goes on to tell us that archaeological discoveries since 1925 have changed all this. Aside from a few diehards among older scholars, there is scarcely a single biblical historian who has not been impressed by the rapid accumulation of data supporting the substantial historicity of patriarchal tradition. In other words, Albright argues that there was great skepticism about the historicity and the reliability of Genesis 11 to 50, but since 1925, there have been so many archaeological discoveries that a serious biblical historian is amazed by how the patriarchal stories of Genesis 11 to 50 is more and more considered to be historically reliable, and so on. So that's one quotation that I wanted to bring to our attention. Here is a quotation from another scholar by the name Sir Frederick Kenyon in the book The Bible and Archaeology. He says, "It is therefore legitimate to say that in respect of that part of the Old Testament against which the disintegrating criticism of the last half of the 19th century was chiefly directed, the evidence of archaeology has been to re-establish its authority and likewise to augment its value by rendering it more intelligible through fuller knowledge of its background and setting. Archaeology has not yet said its last word, but the results already achieved confirm what faith would suggest, that the Bible can do nothing but gain from an increase in knowledge." So why is archaeology important? Archaeology is a relatively new science, but it is important to the student of the Bible because more are the discoveries made by archaeology, the more support is found for individuals and events and cultures that we find in the Bible. With that, I stop with section 1, where we were discussing what is archaeology and why is it important. Now we move on to section 2, where we are going to talk about 4 archaeological discoveries and how they have contributed towards proving the reliability of the Bible. The first discovery I want to talk about is the discovery concerning the Hittite library. Now, 19th century biblical critiques referred to the Hittites as a legendary people. This was because even though the Bible mentioned the Hittites some 50 times, there was no extra biblical evidence for this people. Meaning that there was no evidence outside the Bible that such a group of people existed. And the assumption with which these skeptics are speaking is that if there is no extra biblical evidence, then what is found in the Bible is unreliable. But this problem was solved in 1906 when Hugo Winkler turned the Hittite debate upside down when he discovered more than 10,000 clay tablets of the Royal Hittite Library in Turkey. Imagine what a shock that could have been to the critical scholars who said that the Hittites did not exist. Now we have discovered the Hittite royal library with 10,000 clay tablets being discovered. And these tablets provide a lot of information about the Hittite peoples, their laws, their society, their kingdoms, their empires, their geographical spread, their history, and so on. So no longer can one argue that the Hittites are a mythical people that were fabricated by the fertile imagination of the Hebrew people. That seemingly impossible dilemma for Bible believers and Bible scholars concerning the Hittite people is no longer a problem thanks to archaeology. Number two, there was a time when there were certain biblical skeptics who assumed that David did not exist or the house of David did not exist. There were some who would say that David could have existed, but his kingdom would not have been as big as is described in the Bible, nor would he have had a dynasty as the Bible says that there was a house of David, and therefore again skepticism towards a very important individual that is mentioned in the Bible because there was no extra biblical evidence for it. Now, for Bible-believing Christians and scholars, this was a huge problem because the name of David appears at least 1,000 times in the Bible. The Bible calls Jesus as the son of David. Now, once again, archaeology has come to the rescue. Archaeological discoveries have disproved the critics. Discoveries in northern and southern Israel, Jerusalem and Jordan attest the historicity of David, the extent of his rule and his dynasty's rule, and such that these critiques are without excuse. But a generation or two or more of people believed the critiques in what they said about the unreliability of the Bible and therefore the departure from faith for many people. But later discoveries showed that these scholars were working on biased assumptions and prejudices, and therefore what they were saying were not true. Now, there are many discoveries that point to David and the house of David, but I want to bring to our attention only two of them. This picture that you see here is called the Tel Dan stele, found in 1993 by Avraham Biram at Tel Dan in northern Israel. Now, on this is an inscription made by Assyrian king Hazael to boast of his military campaigns against King Jehu, mentioned in the Bible. Here, Hazael boasts of how he defeated Jehu of the house of David. So not only is David mentioned here, King Jehu, who is mentioned in the Bible, also finds mention here, and also there is mention about the house of David. Now, this inscription is not made by any Israelite. This is coming from the king of Assyria, Hazael by name. Look at another of these pictures. This is called the Mesha stele or the Moabite stone, discovered in 1868 in Dibon in present-day Jordan. This basalt monument is 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. And this is written by King Mesha of Moab in first person to boast over his victories over the kings of Israel. This is now housed in a Louvre museum in France. This stele in its 31st line speaks about the house of David. This stone also provides information about the geography and the history of that time. It speaks about Moab, Israel, Gad, Dibon, Arnon, Madaba, etc. It also speaks about Omri, a king of the northern kingdom Israel, Omri's son Ahab, and it also mentions David. It boasted of how Mesha conquered land east of Jordan, which was for long under the Israeli control. So there are other discoveries in archaeology that also point to the same fact, the historicity of David, and the length of the house of David and the dynasty of David and so on. So once again, the skeptics have been proven wrong by archaeology. Number 3, there were skeptics in the past who have even outrightly denied the existence of Jesus. And many have denied the reliability of the Gospels or the life it describes about Jesus. Now, there are several extra-biblical writings that point to the existence of Jesus and provide us with some important information about the life of Jesus. I'm going to take our attention to only 2, but there are several such references that you could find. The first one is from the Babylonian Talmud, written somewhere between 70 AD and 200 AD. And that Babylonian Talmud says that Jesus was hanged on Passover Eve. So Jesus' death has some connection with the Passover. It was during that time that he was killed. They say that he was hanged. Putting on someone on a cross is similar to hanging a person. And it also says he, meaning Jesus, practiced sorcery and led Israel astray and enticed them into apostasy. So the miracles of Jesus are attributed to the magic of Jesus or the sorcery of Jesus. And the Babylonian Talmud, which is a Jewish writing, is saying that Jesus used these miracles to lead the people of Israel astray and enticed them into apostasy. Christianity was seen as a heretical movement by the Jews. Also, it asserts, as nothing was brought forward in his defense, he was hanged. In other words, it's speaking about the trial of Jesus and the fact that there was nothing brought forth in favor of Jesus, which finally resulted in his being hanged. It continues in the same tractate to say that Jesus was near to the kingship. We do not know exactly what is meant by this phrase or this clause, but it could mean that he was a descendant of King David, Jesus being near to the kingship. And the early rabbis also taught that Jesus had 5 disciples. Now, they are wrong about the number, but they definitely are acknowledging that Jesus had disciples. So look at the number of facts that the Babylonian Talmud are attesting to that is mentioned in the Gospels. Let me give you a Roman historian, Tacitus by name, who writes somewhere around AD 108. He's speaking about King Nero and his attack against the Christians during his reign, and how the Christians were persecuted during that time, and how the Christians faced it and how the other people saw it. And in the midst of all of this, he is mentioning Christ as well. So he writes, to suppress this rumor, Nero fabricated scapegoats and punished with every refinement the notoriously depraved Christians, as they were popularly called. So the fire of Rome is the point of discussion here. And to suppress the rumor that Nero is the one who started the fire, he began to find a scapegoat in the Christians. And Tacitus goes on to write, their originator, Christ, had been executed in Tiberius's reign by the governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate. And look at how he describes Christ as the originator of Christianity, as the originator of the Christian faith, who was executed during the time of Tiberius by the governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate. But in spite of this temporary setback, the deadly superstition had broken out afresh, not only in Judea, where the mischief had started, but even in Rome. In other words, despite the killing of Jesus, the followers of Jesus began to increase in number, not only in Judea or in Jerusalem, but also in Rome. And then he says, first Nero had self-acknowledged Christians arrested. Then on their information, large numbers of others were condemned, not so much for incendiarism, that is arson, as for their antisocial tendencies. And so he goes on to then describe the persecutions that the Christians faced and how the people were sympathetic towards the Christians because they knew that they were not guilty of any crime, and Nero was just, making them a scapegoat and punishing them. Again, the point is that the Babylonian Talmud, which is a Jewish writing, Tacitus, who is a Roman historian, is providing us with extra biblical evidence for the facts that are mentioned in the Gospels as well. I have many other Roman historians and other writers from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd centuries who speak about Jesus, but we do not have the time to discuss that. Let me get to the 4th and the final archaeological point that I want to make. There was a time when biblical skeptics considered Luke to be an unreliable historian with little to no knowledge of the geography that he was describing in the book of Acts or the history that he is describing in the book of Acts. This was so because some of the terms that he used and some of the places that he mentioned and some of the individuals that he mentioned in the book of Acts were unknown to the people outside the Bible. In other words, there was no extra biblical evidence for it. You see the picture, don't you? The skeptics come with the assumption that if something in the Bible is not supported by something outside the Bible, it's immediately false and it is unreliable. That bias and prejudice can be seen today, especially after the discovery of all these archaeological points. However, today archaeological discoveries have time and time again attested to the historical and geographical reliability of the book of Acts. So much so that Sir William Ramsay, who is one of the greatest archaeologists, who was himself once skeptical of Luke's ability as a historian, went on to call him one of the greatest historians, even superior to the Greek historian Thucydides. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. It is now well known that Luke was very careful with his use of words. The words that he used in the book of Acts to describe positions or offices in the Roman world are extremely accurate. For example, he used words like asiarch and politarch. These words are now found in inscriptions in different places. His mention of Gallio, the proconsul, Erastus, the city treasurer, the temple keeper at the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, the scribe of Demos, etc., have all been found to be true. Discovery after discovery have attested to not just the historicity of the book of Acts, but also to the ability of Luke as a very capable historian. Now, with that, I'm bringing to a close our discussion on archaeology and the Bible and how archaeology has played an important role in proving the reliability of the Bible. We are not done with the doctrine of the Bible. We are yet to discuss doctrines like the canonization of the Old Testament, canonization of the New Testament, and so on. We will come to you soon with those kinds of videos. I hope this discussion has been a blessing to you and it has equipped you in your being an evangelist and your being a Bible student and also an apologist for the Christian faith. God bless you. Thank you.